In early 2026, an amateur drone pilot was mapping a stretch of northern Alaska, a sprawling, frozen wilderness known for its brutal weather and extreme isolation. It is a region with a documented history of unexplained events. For decades, local authorities have recorded disappearances surrounding the old, abandoned mining camps scattered across these mountains. Because of the harsh winter conditions, the drone operator assumed he was entirely alone. That assumption completely dissolved the exact moment a massive, dark shape began moving directly beneath the frozen lake. Online estimates gauged the object at over 60 feet long. It crept slowly through the water, pausing briefly before suddenly shifting direction. A split second later, the surface of the lake violently shattered as snow and jagged ice exploded upward. The drone's camera shook violently as the pilot attempted an emergency maneuver. Then, the feed cut to black. The connection dropped entirely. The sheer remoteness of the Alaskan wilderness provided a natural veil, obscuring a massive, active biological anomaly from the rest of the world. The recovered footage was uploaded that night and viewed millions of times within days. Viewers immediately split into factions, debating whether it was a digital hoax or a recording of an unknown species. To test the footage, independent researchers applied biological motion analysis to the raw video files to see if the movement followed the laws of physics. This diagram maps out the movement vectors of the shadow. A mechanical craft, like a submarine, requires a linear propulsion path. The telemetry mapped here shows undulating and segmented movements consistent with biological propulsion. By applying a stress fracture overlay to the broken ice, researchers found that the upward physical force exerted on the surface aligns with the timing of the creature's movements. Digital manipulation often fails to accurately replicate these specific organic stress physics in a chaotic environment like cracking ice. The forensic data indicates that the footage follows the laws of physics and biology too closely for a standard digital fabrication. It suggests a physical interaction with the environment that has yet to be explained. The digital data quickly aligned with physical reality on the ground as local residents began volunteering their own observations. Local hunters reported finding enormous, unidentifiable tracks carved into the snowbanks. Others documented deep, resonating vibrations and strange guttural sounds emanating from beneath the frozen lakes long after sundown. Looking at this topographical map of the region, we can track a severe ecological disruption. This expanding red zone indicates where entire groups of local wildlife vanished, radiating outward from the drone's coordinates. The entity acts as a massive physical predator, actively sweeping the region and altering the local food chain. As researchers compiled the modern ecological damage, they realized the exact same patterns existed in the historical record. Native Alaskan oral traditions have warned for generations about colossal, submerged entities dwelling deep beneath the ice. These indigenous records contain descriptions of deep subterranean growling and the violent fracturing of lake ice, details that mirror the 2026 biological and seismic data with precision. The 2026 drone footage provides a modern visual record of the same behaviors described in these centuries-old warnings. This entity isn't a new arrival. It has been a documented part of the region's ecology for generations. The moment the public began synthesizing the drone footage with eyewitness accounts and local history, authorities rapidly intervened. The Federal Aviation Administration locked down the airspace over the remote Alaskan region, and military helicopters were dispatched to monitor the skies. Simultaneously, convoys of unmarked federal vehicles initiated a coordinated physical blockade, sealing off all nearby access roads and turning back local traffic. Massive multi-agency deployments require heavy logistical justification. The scale of this mobilization indicates the government immediately classified the biological entity as a severe active threat. The blockade extended far beyond physical barricades and restricted airspace. This side-by-side comparison of civilian satellite maps illustrates the censorship. On the left is the clear topography of the lake prior to the incident. On the right, the exact same coordinates have been aggressively pixelated and digitally redacted from public databases. The speed of this multi-layered lockdown, from ground troops to digital erasure, points to a pre-existing protocol for this specific region. Whether or not they knew exactly what was under the ice, they were prepared to hide it the moment it was seen. When this drone footage first hit the internet, the consensus among experts was that it was a hoax. A small team of independent investigators set out to prove that. They entered the restricted Alaskan wilderness equipped with thermal drones, advanced sonar scanners, and ground-penetrating radar. The initial search of the lake yielded nothing unusual, supporting the theory that the original sighting was a fabrication. That changed when the sonar registered massive movement deep below the ice. Within weeks of that detection, 2 members of the expedition vanished during a nighttime operation, and the investigation was abandoned. By isolating the technical data left behind by the missing researchers, we can construct a picture of the entity that the team encountered beneath the Alaskan ice. The first primary data stream comes from ground-penetrating radar. This technology pulses radio waves through the ice to map the subterranean environment. This animated diagram maps deep, interconnected tunnels stretching for miles beneath the Alaskan terrain. Zooming in, these exceptionally smooth junctions contradict jagged natural erosion. Adding a scale comparison reveals they are far too massive for Arctic wildlife, clearly movement pathways for an immense physical entity. Along with the radar mapping, the team captured several minutes of low-frequency audio as night fell on the ice. The recordings contain a mix of deep whale calls, metallic groaning, and distant roars. These sounds did not match the acoustic signature of any known Arctic animal. The investigation team noted a correlation between these sounds and their hardware. Every time the acoustic signals intensified, the team's high-tech equipment began to malfunction. Combining the scale of the tunnels with the disruptive nature of the sounds suggests that the entity beneath the lake is large enough to create these pathways and emits enough energy to interfere with surface electronics. As this data reached the public, theories about the entity's origin began to spread rapidly. Most focused on 3 biological possibilities: a surviving prehistoric species, a giant unknown marine predator, or an undiscovered Arctic cryptid. However, the physical findings of the tunnels and sounds also align with ancient Inuit folklore from the region. Local oral traditions passed down through generations warn hunters to avoid certain lakes in winter. These legends describe massive beings that sleep beneath the frozen north. The team's instruments had documented a set of physical conditions that aligned with these historical warnings of a sleeping giant. The expedition ended after a nighttime drone operation triggered a sudden, violent response from the environment. According to the surviving team, strange vibrations began shaking the ice, followed by the immediate failure of all communication devices. As the strange vibrations intensified beneath their feet, deep structural cracks suddenly splintered across the entire surface of the frozen lake. 2 researchers vanished during this seismic event. They were never found. The team halted all operations and left Alaska, but they released one final recording captured during the event. It begins as a low rumble. It then transforms into the rhythmic sound of a giant creature breathing beneath the frozen lake. The events in Alaska suggest that these specific oral traditions function as survival warnings. The data indicates that the entity described in those warnings has been disturbed, and that it is now completely awake. Alaska's interior contains millions of acres of frozen lakes and jagged mountains that remain largely unmapped. It is an isolated environment where the silence is rarely broken by human activity. But that silence has recently become a source of panic. Experienced investigators and drone operators have begun abandoning the region, leaving behind equipment and fleeing the interior in total silence. While the government denies any unusual activity, the witnesses who escape describe a consistent, terrifying sight, something massive shifting beneath the surface of the ice. This sudden retreat matches warnings that have existed for centuries. The modern panic is finally catching up to a history that many had dismissed. Native Alaskan tribes told stories about giant beings hidden beneath frozen lakes and mountains. These accounts describe giants that sleep beneath the earth, remaining dormant until they are disturbed. According to the lore, once awakened, these beings bring destruction to the surface. In 2026, reports of glowing shapes and massive underwater movements began to surface. These sightings align with the descriptions passed down through tribal generations. The specificity of these ancient descriptions provides a framework for evaluating current events. We can treat these tribal accounts as a series of historical observations that are now facing modern scientific scrutiny. If a massive biological organism truly exists hidden beneath the ice, it requires a way to survive in total, complete isolation. The prehistoric survivor theory suggests this is possible. Parts of the Alaskan interior have been locked beneath ice for thousands of years, creating self-contained ecosystems that are cut off from the outside world. This environment shares many characteristics with the deep ocean. In those unmapped aquatic depths, massive species thrive in extreme conditions that remain largely misunderstood by modern science. Recent witness reports of glowing biological shapes and shadows tracking through frozen channels suggest a similar mechanism is at work here. A protected, deep ice ecosystem would provide the necessary stability to sustain an ancient leviathan, satisfying the sleeping giant criteria found in the legends. If these creatures only emerge when provoked, we have to identify the catalyst. What was large enough to shatter their isolation? One explanation points to the government theory. Evidence suggests the military has operated classified research facilities and conducted underground Arctic experiments in the region for decades. Satellite imagery recently captured massive deep blue cracks forming across previously solid lakes. These aren't natural fractures. They indicate structural failure from below. Before the data was scrubbed from public maps, researchers detected significant heat signatures emanating from these fracture zones. Secret drilling and biological testing likely provided the exact disturbance described in the ancient tribal warnings, triggering an awakening. The presence of heat signatures beneath the ground and shadows moving under the ice suggests an active biological entity has been displaced by military activity. Throughout late 2026, the situation on the ground intensified. Residents across the wilderness began reporting massive, unidentifiable roars that echo through the valleys at night. Drone operators attempting to document these areas found their equipment suddenly failed. The electronics were neutralized by unknown interference, leaving the sighting locations unmonitored. The government's efforts to scrub satellite data and silence investigators suggest they are managing the consequences of disturbing a prehistoric force. The native Alaskan tribes were acting as historical record keepers. Their detailed descriptions of sleeping giants were based on generational observations of the natural world and the massive threats hidden within it. Official channels remain silent, but the continued refusal of investigators to return to the Alaskan interior speaks for itself. Somewhere deep within Alaska's frozen wilderness, whatever moved beneath that lake may still be there today.